The more someone talks, the less you trust them. The quieter they are, the more powerful they seem. This isn't a coincidence. It's psychology. And once you understand why talking too much is silently destroying your credibility, your relationships, and your influence, you'll never look at conversation the same way again. Here is the paradox nobody talks about. The people who talk the most often have the least impact, and the people who say the least can control every room they walk into. You've seen this happen. There's the person at the meeting who talks constantly, but nobody really listens. And then there's the person who speaks just once, and everyone goes quiet, hanging on their every word. Same room, completely different levels of power. Why? It comes down to how our brains value things. Scarcity. Whatever is rare feels valuable. Whatever is abundant feels cheap. Your words are no different. When you talk constantly, your words become cheap. They're just noise. But when you speak rarely and with intention, your words become expensive. People lean in. They listen. They remember what you said. You've created scarcity, and that scarcity creates value. The first psychological truth about talking too much is that it signals insecurity, not confidence. We often assume that talkative people are bursting with confidence, but that's usually wrong. Constant talking is often a way to manage anxiety. When you're uncomfortable with silence, you fill it with noise. When you're not sure how people see you, you over-explain yourself. When you're afraid of being judged, you just keep talking, hoping that eventually something you say will land and make people like you. Truly confident people are comfortable with silence. They don't feel the need to fill every single gap in a conversation. They don't need to constantly explain or justify themselves. They don't need verbal confirmation that they're being well received. They say what they mean, and then they stop. The silence that follows isn't awkward for them. It's intentional. It gives their words space to breathe and to have an impact. Think about it. Someone who talks too much is almost asking a question with every sentence. Do you like me? Am I interesting? Am I good enough? They're seeking validation through sheer volume. And the tragic irony is, the more they talk to get that approval, the less they actually get it, because nothing signals low status faster than a desperate need for attention. The second truth is that talking too much destroys your mystery, and mystery is magnetic. The most fascinating people in any room are the ones you don't fully understand yet. Every new piece of information you learn about them makes you want to know even more. But if someone tells you their entire life story in the first 5 minutes of meeting them, there's nothing left to discover. They've laid all their cards on the table immediately, and now they have no hand left to play. This is why people who overshare on a first date rarely get a second one. They gave away their whole story way too fast. Your personal story is your most valuable social currency. You should spend it slowly. Make people earn the different pieces of it over time. Each revelation should feel like a special gift, not a flood of information. The moment someone feels overwhelmed by your personal details, they stop being curious about you. Here's the brutal truth. The more you talk about yourself, the less interesting you actually become. Paradoxically, saying almost nothing about yourself, while asking deep, thoughtful questions about the other person, makes you the most interesting one in the room. They'll walk away from the conversation thinking, wow, that was fascinating, and you barely spoke a word about yourself. That's because you made them feel fascinating, and people are addicted to feeling fascinating. The third truth is that your words lose their power through repetition and sheer volume. Think about someone you know who complains constantly. After a while, you just stop hearing it. Their complaints become background noise. But what about someone who almost never complains? When they finally do say that something is wrong, you stop everything and listen. The rarity of their complaint makes it significant. This is a concept called verbal inflation. When you produce too many words, each individual word becomes worth less. It's like a currency that's been printed too much it loses its value. Every unnecessary word you speak is devaluing your entire verbal currency. The loudest person in the room is usually the least influential. And the quietest person, they're often the one pulling all the strings. You see this in leadership all the time. The most effective leaders don't talk constantly. They listen, they observe, they process information, and when they finally do speak, Their words land like a hammer, because everyone in the room knows they only speak when it truly matters. Their silence isn't an absence of thought. It's the presence of discipline. The fourth truth is the most counterintuitive of all. Silence is a form of communication, and it's often more powerful than words. When you respond to an insult with silence, you're saying more than any clever comeback ever could. You're communicating that the insult and the person who said it are not worth your energy. When you pause for a moment before answering a question, you communicate that you're thinking deeply about your response. When you let someone finish their thought without interrupting, you communicate respect and your own self. Most people are terrified of silence because it feels like emptiness. But psychologically, silence creates pressure. When you stop talking during a negotiation, the other person feels an overwhelming compulsion to fill that gap, and they usually do it with concessions. Interrogators know this. Therapists know this. Great salespeople know this. Silence makes people so uncomfortable that they'll often say things they didn't intend to, just to make the silence end. The person who can sit in silence without flinching is the one who controls the conversation. The person who has to fill every silent moment is being controlled by it. And the fifth and final truth is this. Listening is the most underrated power skill that exists. And I mean real listening, not just waiting for your turn to talk, but actually absorbing what someone is saying. This skill makes you dangerous in the best way possible, because when people feel genuinely heard, they reveal everything. They tell you their fears, their desires, their weaknesses, and their motivations. And all of that is information. Talkers give away information. Listeners collect it. And in any interaction, the person with more information always has more power. This is why the best negotiators, therapists, and leaders are obsessive listeners. They understand that every word someone else speaks is a piece of data. And data is power. So here's the paradox all wrapped up. You talk more because you want to be heard, but the more you talk, the less you're actually heard. You talk to seem interesting, but you become less interesting. You talk to gain approval, but you lose credibility. You talk to fill the silence, but that silence would have given you far more power. Everything you're trying to achieve by talking more, you would actually achieve more effectively through strategic silence. The most powerful version of you isn't the one who has a response for everything. It's the version that knows when not to respond, when not to explain, when not to defend. It's the version that knows when to just let silence do the heavy lifting, because silence is the language of people who don't need to prove anything. So, here's a challenge for you. The next conversation you have, try talking 30% less than you normally would. Ask more questions. Let the silences breathe, and just watch how the entire dynamic of the conversation shifts. Watch how people start leaning toward you instead of away from you. Subscribe for more psychology that will actually change how you move through the world. And comment below. Are you a talker or a listener? Be honest.